Hello, Mr. Ganino here again with Chapter 10 in Nancy Drew's The Secret in the Old Attic. Today I posted a copy of one of the original covers to this book. And you all know that we've got permission to record this. And that's actually the back of that same book as well. All right, Chapter 10, Dangerous Adventure. Delighted with her discovery, Nancy now was intent on finding a container to get a sample from the Dite chemical vats. There must be a bottle here somewhere. Suddenly, beside her shoulder, the girl saw a black widow spider crawling through an open ventilator shaft. In horror, she backed away quickly. Then she killed it with her shoe. I wonder what's on the other side of the ventilator. An idea came to her. Maybe Bushy Trot uses spiders to make silk the way Mr. Booker does. Excited, she looked through the ventilator. It was dark beyond, but Nancy found a switch which lighted the inner room. It was filled with glass cases, but she could not see what was in them. I must find out if there's spiders that spin silk thread, she decided. If so, that will be another bit of evidence against Mr. Dite. Near the ventilator was a door which apparently led to the room. To Nancy's annoyance, it had no knob or visible lock, nor could it be pushed or pulled. It must open by means of a secret spring, she reasoned. With patience, Nancy moved her hand over every inch of the panel, and suddenly the door swung inward. I must have touched the spring, she thought happily. Scarcely had the door closed behind her when she heard footsteps outdoors. Evidently, the night watchman, attracted by the light that she had turned on, had come to investigate. But the man did not come in. Doesn't he have a key, Nancy wondered, or does he suspect an intruder's in here? All this while Nancy had continued to explore the inner room of the laboratory. She noticed that the cases contained spiders, but they were not the harmless orb weavers like those at the Booker factory. These are deadly black widows, but maybe they're just as useful for making thread, she wondered. Bushy Trot has courage to work with the poisonous things. I wonder what Effie would say to that. Effie? Nancy suddenly recalled her promise to go back to Pleasant Hedges. She glanced at her watch and was startled to see how late it was. I must get a sample of the chemical solution in the other room and then find my way out, Nancy decided. Once more she pressed against the secret panel and it swung open. Quietly she returned to the outer room and hunted for an empty container. I know, Nancy chuckled. Why didn't I think of this before? In her pocket were two miniature bottles, part of the March collection. She had intended to offer them to Mr. Dite, but in her haste to leave his office, she had forgotten to do so. Though small, each receptacle was provided with a large stopper. Taking care not to wet her fingers with the chemical, Nancy filled the containers from two different tanks. Again, she heard footsteps outside the building. What should she do? Turn off the lights or leave them on? Nancy decided to leave it on and avoid calling further attention to herself. But I'd better escape as soon as possible, she thought. Then she remembered that Trot had locked all the doors. Recalling that there was another door inside the spidery, she decided to take a chance on that one. Again, she pressed the secret spring, and the door opened. As she slid through, Nancy heard the squeal of car brakes outside. Then came the sound of running feet. In panic, Nancy sped to the door at the far end of the spidery. She felt a momentary sense of helplessness when it would not open, but with an extra tug, it finally did open. A steep flight of stairs led downward. As she groped along, Nancy became aware of a cool breeze flowing across her face. That's fresh air, she said to herself, trying to be calm. This cellar must have an outside exit. Inching her way, Nancy followed the stream of air. Not far ahead, she saw the dim patch of light. Stumbling towards it, she came to the entrance of a low tunnel with a tiny electric bulb above it. This must be the way out, she decided. Bending over, Nancy crept along. The tunnel was not long. Soon the floor began to slope at a steep angle. In another dozen yards, Nancy came to a heavy door with a small opening in it. The door was not locked from her side, so she opened it without difficulty. After closing the door, which locked itself, she climbed a flight of stone steps to an alley. Free! She congratulated herself, but what a scare. Nancy stood for a moment by the factory wall. Breathing deeply at the night air, she sought to get her bearings. Some distance away, she saw a street lamp and a main road. She decided that that must be the south boundary of the plant. Nancy started forward, but immediately paused. A man had just entered the alley. He held his head so low she could not see his face. His manner of walking, however, was very familiar. That's Bushy Trot, she thought in a panic. If he catches me here, all of my night's work will be a total loss. Frantic, Nancy looked around for a hiding place in the alley. She did not want to go back to the cellar. Perhaps he won't notice me behind this gasoline drum, she thought, hopefully. The alleyway was in deep shadow, lighted only by the far-off street lamp at the entrance. Crouching behind the drum, Nancy waited. The man came near and passed within a foot of Nancy, but did not see her. Trot descended to the cellar passageway. A moment later, Nancy heard the dull click of a lock as the heavy door swung shut. Whew, lucky I didn't hide down there, she thought. Now I gotta get home. Out on the street, Nancy got her bearings and headed for her car. As she stepped inside, the young detective breathed a sigh of relief. I really must watch my step, Nancy said to herself. In a short time, she reached her own house. Through an unshaded window in the living room, she could see Hannah Gruen talking excitedly to her father. He was pacing the floor nervously. Wonder if they're worried about me, Nancy thought as she unlocked the front door and hurried inside. Nancy, where have you been? Exclaimed Mr. Drew. Mrs. Gruen was equally relieved. I've been so worried about you. With a great sigh, Nancy dropped to the sofa. Now that the strain was over, she realized how utterly exhausted she was. Oh, I've had a perfectly awful experience, she confessed. I was locked in the Dite factory. Locked in, her father said. Mr. Dite has a room where he keeps black widow spiders. One of the horrible things was only a few inches from my shoulder, but I'm glad I went there just the same. I shudder to think of your taking such risks to help me, my dear, her father said. Come have dinner and tell me everything. While the housekeeper hurried to reheat Nancy's meal, the young detective removed the tiny bottles of fluid from her pocket and carefully placed them on the table. Here's some of the solution from Mr. Dite's private laboratory. It certainly looks as if it's been copied from Mr. Booker's method of making the beautiful silk thread. I'll take this sample to Mr. Booker immediately tomorrow, the lawyer exclaimed. If it proves to be the same formula as his, then I can institute proceedings against Mr. Dite. Nancy related her adventure in detail as she ate and said she had promised Effie she would return to the March mansion for the night. Dad, would you drive me out to Pleasant Hedges? Glad to. Meanwhile, at the March home, Effie was growing more and more alarmed because Nancy had failed to arrive. Every time Effie heard a car on the road, she would listen and wait for it to appear, pressing her face against the window pane and peering out through the dark pines. Nancy never broke a promise to me before, she told Mr. March. She knows I'm scared to stay here all night without her. I'm sure something important came up, he replied. Better stop worrying. When 10 o'clock came, he decided to go to bed. Effie decided that it would be futile for her to wait much longer for Nancy. Reluctantly, she went to her room and prepared to go to bed. What a dark, gloomy night, the maid observed as she looked out the window. Not even a moon. Her thoughts on the weather ended abruptly. Beneath the window, she saw a stealthy, indistinct figure move. someone was creeping along the high, untrimmed hedge which ran beside the wing of the rambling house. And that is the end of chapter 10. Join me for chapter 11. I'll be recording it very shortly. Bye-bye.